so stoked to be here, to have a place like BHA where people like me with MBAs can walk into what we do and walk into conservation and have mentors and amazing people surrounding them just to accomplish what we all want to do, which is protecting those public lands for our future. So after 6 days of hunting and 60 miles of hiking, my boyfriend Marco and I were kneeling in the grass side by side, both at full draw, with a bull elk staring right at us 40 yards away. Now, before I tell you what happens next, let's just say I'm glad he didn't leave me on that mountain. We had met just a few months before in a country bar, and I found out he was a bow hunter and Italian, so it was pretty much love at first Coors Light. And a short while later, he decided we should put in for the draw together in New Mexico. So, you know, my family cautioned me. We all felt like it was moving pretty fast. But we ended up drawing 2 tags for our first ever bull elk archery hunts. And we were in a unit just north of the storied Gila Wilderness, where, of course, there's giant bulls, and south of the plains of St. Augustine. So this is a really grassy, rolling hills wilderness unit, super limited road access with a 14% success rate. So that means out of 60 tags to go out, it was suspected that 8 hunters would walk out of there with bulls. And to raise the stakes even more, our good friend Corey Jacobson told me you should probably just go ahead and turn your tags back in. So it only took us one shed hunting trip to realize that when it came to explaining where something was to each other, it was like we were speaking in tongues. I would, look at the hill and explain where something was and finally end up yelling, "It's right there!" And so we committed to ourselves to a rigorous schedule of watching elk hunt YouTube tutorials and realized that we had basically invented elk hunt couples counseling. And, after months and months of preparation, September was finally here. And of course, the first night driving in to camp, we see a guy in an old beat-up pickup truck and roll down the window to talk to him. And through a puff of Marlboro red smoke, he tells us, "I've been here 7 days and there ain't no elk on that damn mountain." And that very same night, we found elk. In fact, Marco ended up stalking the biggest bull of the whole trip that night. And we hunted hard from dawn to dusk every single day. On day 3, we ended up bumping a little bull in the timber, and we both had our first shots, and we both missed. But the most memorable day is day 5, and for various reasons, that day is forever burned into my memory. We started off the day and went in this deep canyon and saw 4 bulls coming towards us, and kind of made the decision to stalk together. But before I knew it, I was going right and he was going left. And due to that miscommunication, neither of us got close. So at that point, tensions were rising. We were getting chances. And we hiked out of that ridge, and he looks over to the next one and sees a big 6x6 bull bedded under a cliff band. And it was late in the afternoon, so the thermals were just blowing perfectly uphill, and there was one saddle separating us from this bull. So he gave me the chance. I told him, "You should go, you can kill this bull." And he says, "No, you're gonna do it." Made me drop my pack, grab me by the shoulders and looks me in the eye, tells me a plan and says, "Get out there." So I run around the back of the hill and I am stalking down this slope to this bull, only moving when the wind blows and trying to avoid all the crunchy grass and dry shale. And when I'm to the point that we picked out as like the perfect spot to try to get to this bull, I look over on my binos at Marco and he gives me a thumbs up. So I know the bull is still there. And I start ranging, and right as I'm about to take that last step, I see antler. And I swear to God, if I don't make money with BHA, I could write a book called The Last Bush, because every time I try to take those last 2 steps, I ruin everything. So I try to draw back as this bull is moving from right to left across my shooting lane, and I can't. He starts walking a little bit faster, and I'm able to draw the second time, and luckily my mouth call was already in my mouth. So I cow called and stopped him broadside, and here is this big, beautiful bull at what I think is 40 yards away, standing right in front of me, antlers glistening in the sun on the edge of this cliff after what I thought was a perfect stalk. I settle my pin and know that this is the moment I had trained for. This was the moment that would make me a bow hunter. And I released my arrow, and my heart sank as I heard my arrow clink on the rocks below. I thought it was over. I didn't think I was gonna get any more chances after that. But Marco brought me my shoes and dealt with my hysterical crying, and we kept hunting. And just a few minutes later, he saw a herd bull just running cows in the plains below us, so we decided to drop 1,000 feet down the canyon to go chase this bull. And we tried for about 4 hours to try to get him to come in. He never would. And so at sunset, we're like, okay, we should probably leave. At that point, we realized Marco had like 2 ounces of water left. You know, we'd been hunting all day, didn't prepare quite for that. We were totally dehydrated. So we needed to get home. So we started walking up this little ravine so the elk couldn't see us. And what do you know, we hit a brush pile about as tall as I am, and with all these cute little holes where the snakes and, you know, kangaroo rats can run in and out. So Marco goes right around this and thinks he hears a rattle. So I'm sitting there trying to decide what to do, and I'm like, I'm gonna go left. I take one step, and this black snake just shoots right out from under my feet and into one of the holes. So we get around the brush pile, and 30 seconds later, he runs into another snake. Walk a little bit longer, boom, another snake. So we're finding them, locating them, make sure we can hear them, and walking around. And they're these little tiny banded rock rattlesnakes. They're super beautiful, but they like the talus-y slope that we're on. I'm starting to get a little nervous at this point. So we keep walking, and within another minute, we hit another one. And this wouldn't be such a big deal, but my boots had rubbed my ankles raw, so I was wearing my La Sportiva trail runners that day. Marco just saw the fear in my eyes. I mean, I froze, and he was like, you know, at least they make sound, so you know when they're there and we can keep going. So for the next hour, we're climbing out of this canyon, going just across probably 4 or 5 cliff bands, bows in one hand and climbing with the other. Once we get to the top, I'm like, oh, thank God we made it. We're away from all the snakes. Well, he's scanning the top of the mountain because there's this one fence line that we can follow that's 3 miles on the top back to the truck. I'm like, we're home free, phones don't matter, water doesn't matter, we're good. Well, he hits 2 sets of eyes in this tree, and one of the animals jumps down and starts crouching and stalking in the grass. So I didn't have a sidearm that day. I knocked an arrow, and I'm like gauging whether I can hit a lion in the face or I should just stab it. And he tells me to put my arrow away and cross the fence, so I do, and he makes, you know, noises so it can smell us. So for the next mile, we are just covering ground, putting as much space in between us and whatever that was as possible. Well, he was so dehydrated at that point, he was like basically shaking, and his foot hit a rock and he went down hard. You know, here's this big, strong guy, and he just had this moment where he couldn't go anymore. His, you know, perfectly tuned Matthews Triax went flying about 10 feet in the air. And we just sat there for a second to regroup, and I had so much adrenaline and fear this whole time. You know, I was literally the whole time just thinking, if we don't die on this mountain, he better propose to me. So, you know, we're sitting there, and I'm just gathering my thoughts. I'm, you know, trying to keep it together. And he says, possibly the worst thing anyone could have said to me at that time. He said, do you think those were bobcats or mountain lions? And I'm like, dude, do you think we could talk about that later? So we got back to the tent for the next 3 hours. I mean, my adrenaline is just pumping, and every time I start to fall asleep, I hear or see a snake. But it was all worth it. The next day, Marco told me, you know, most guys he knows probably couldn't have made it through that the way I did, and that really meant a lot for me. And the next day, we found elk, and we were in a situation where he was calling for me, and we saw 2, but we heard 3. And all of a sudden, of course, a third bull sneak attacked us before I could turn around, and he didn't have his bow. So, you know, we had this little moment where we could have had a shot, and we both messed it up. Yes, we both messed it up. So it was inevitable, but then it happened. We fought, And, I was upset at him, he was upset at me, and I'm like, man, it took me 32 years to find this great guy, and I'm throwing it all away on an elk hunt. But we, had this conversation. I was about to quit. I was pouting, going back to the truck, and he's like, no, you can't be a quitter. So we decided to keep going, but during that conversation, he impressed upon me one very important thing, which is we cannot miss any more opportunities. So we chase this herd around the hill, and we see him on the slope below us. So, we get down there, we start creeping through the grass, and boom, there's cows at 40 yards. Well, the wind swirled, and the cows spooked and started running off, but right away he bugled. And when he bugled, that bull came up to see who was there and stuck his head above the long grass. And we both decided it's go time. So I tried to draw back, but I'd broken my wrist sling, so I'd made it really tight, and I couldn't. So I told him to shoot. It was pretty much his turn. Well, as he was drawing back, I readjusted, and I also came to full draw. So here I am, third shot of the trip, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. I settled my pin right where we practiced, and I wish I could say I blacked out for this part, but I was fully conscious. I pulled the trigger, and I started just crying hysterically, thinking not only did I just miss this bull, but he was a pretty great guy, and he's probably gone too. So he looks at the bull and just automatically sees it was a solid hit, sees lung blood, and the bull is going down. And I think it's a really great test of someone's character if you can shoot the animal that is in their sights, because you can just really, see what they're like. I would recommend it. So we walk up to my bull, and it's just this big, beautiful animal, and I'm in total disbelief. But I know that we still have another tag, and we still have a day to hunt. And so, we pack this thing out together that night and the next morning, and we hunt that next evening. And we go back to where all the bulls were the day before, and it's a ghost town. Nobody's home. And Marco's so tired that he leaves his binos on the side of the hillside, so we have to go grit it out and pick those out. And he says, let's go back to camp early. I'm really exhausted. Maybe we won't wake up for the morning hunt. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, he's not gonna get a bull because of me, right? And so we get back to where we had stashed my rack under a tree, and we're just getting ready to put down our bags to pack it out. And he lets out the most disheartened, sad cow call, I know nobody's there, but here I am anyways. And a bull just roars back. And then we see cows right ahead of us. So I slink down to the ground. He makes his way to the trees, and he just starts cutting this bull off when he bugles and beating a bush. This bull was furious. So as he is raking a bush, Marco closes the gap, and finally when he steps out, he has a perfect 70-yard shot, and I hear a second bull go down. So here we are, all of a sudden, with 2 bulls down in 2 days. I'd like to note that his was bigger, so Mountain Karma came through in the end. And we, packed out this bull, took us 2 packs, and we had to go back to get their antlers. And, every step was just grueling at the end, but we did it just the 2 of us. And we basically got back to the truck, and just like the first night we met, we shared a cold, cheap beer. And even though I cried hysterically and stole his shot and may have taken the only wipey one day when we only brought 1 wipey, I don't use my socks, I'm not a heathen. He decided that he wants to hunt with me for the rest of his life.
Give it up for Katie DeLorenzo.